I remember the exact moment my life at Horizon Analytics changed forever. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where Chicago's spring sunshine streamed through the office windows, creating those perfect diagonal rays across our open floor plan. I was presenting my quarterly client retention analysis, a project I'd spent 3 months perfecting, when James Wilson, my new supervisor of exactly 6 weeks, interrupted me mid-sentence. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah, I think we need to stick to the facts here. You're getting too invested. His voice carried that specific tone men often use when they want to sound reasonable while being anything but. Let's keep emotions out of this and focus on the numbers. The conference room fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes darted between us, then quickly found sudden interest in their notepads or screens. I felt heat rising to my face but kept my expression neutral. These are the numbers, James. The client satisfaction metrics show a direct correlation to our personalized approach. We're not here to talk about feelings. He cut me off again, smiling to the room. Let's move on to something more concrete. David, why don't you show us the new dashboard interface? As David scrambled to pull up his presentation, I closed my laptop slowly, deliberately, and took my seat. 7 years at Horizon Analytics. 7 years of promotions, innovations, and building the very client prediction models that had increased our retention by 68%. And in 6 short weeks, James Wilson had managed to reduce me to the emotional female analyst, who apparently couldn't separate facts from feelings. What James didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that I had been quietly making moves of my own. Moves that would soon change everything about the power dynamics in that room. The day James Wilson arrived at Horizon Analytics was nothing special at first glance. Another reorganization, another male executive parachuted in from somewhere prestigious to optimize operations. We'd been through similar transitions before. But something about the way he strode into our department meeting that first morning, Brooks Brothers suit tailored to perfection, MIT class ring prominently displayed, confidence radiating from every pore, made my stomach tighten with apprehension. Morning, everyone. James Wilson, your new head of analytics operations. He scanned the room, making eye contact with each person except, I noticed, any of the women present. I've reviewed our performance metrics, and while you've all done admirable work, there's substantial room for improvement. I come from Bluestream Tech, where we increased productivity by 43% through some simple structural changes. Simple structural changes. I'd heard that euphemism before. It usually meant layoffs, reassignments, and dismantling carefully cultivated team dynamics in favor of whatever management philosophy was trending in Harvard Business Review that month. My colleague Mike caught my eye from across the table and raised an eyebrow. He knew what I was thinking. We'd built the client prediction algorithm together 3 years ago, staying late every night for months, testing variables, refining parameters. That algorithm was now responsible for 40% of company revenue. Mike and I had received a modest bonus and a handshake for our innovation. The executives who presented it to the board got stock options. I should probably tell you about myself at this point. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I have a double master's in data science and behavioral economics from Northwestern. I joined Horizon Analytics right out of grad school, drawn by their promise of innovative work in predictive market analysis. In 7 years, I'd climbed from entry-level analyst to senior data strategist, leading a team of 12 brilliant people. I'd designed methodologies that transformed how the company forecast market trends. I'd published papers that other firms cited. I'd built something I was genuinely proud of. Yet there I sat, watching James Wilson erase my contributions with casual efficiency. I'll be conducting one-on-ones with each team lead this week, James announced as the meeting concluded. Sarah, let's start with you. My office, 2 o'clock. I nodded, already mentally preparing my project summaries and team performance data. If this was my evaluation, I'd make damn sure he had the complete picture. At exactly 1:58 p.m., I knocked on James's door, folder in hand. He was on the phone but waved me in with that peculiar gesture executives use, a dismissive flick of the wrist that somehow conveys both enter and you're interrupting simultaneously. Look, Tom, just make it happen. I don't need the details. I need results. He ended the call without saying goodbye. Sarah, have a seat. His office, formerly occupied by our previous director Laura, had been transformed in less than a day. Laura's diverse collection of business books and industry reports had been replaced by sparse shelving featuring what looked like the same business book in multiple copies, James's name emblazoned on the cover. Decisive leadership, cutting through. Emotion to drive results. A framed Blue Stream Tech magazine feature hung prominently behind his desk. The warm desk lamp and plants were gone, replaced by stark overhead lighting. So, he leaned back in his chair, glancing at his computer, screen rather than at me. Tell me about your team's current projects. I opened my folder. I've prepared an overview of our 4 main initiatives. The client retention predictor has been our most successful, increasing renewal rates by... I've seen the numbers, he interrupted, still not making eye contact. What I want to know is why your team dedicates so many resources to client experience metrics. Seems inefficient. I blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Client experience metrics are actually the strongest predictors of renewal and expansion. We've mapped over 200 variables and found that emotional satisfaction outweighs pricing considerations by a factor of emotional satisfaction, he repeated, finally looking at me directly. His expression suggested I'd proposed we consult a psychic. Sarah, this is business. Clients make decisions based on ROI, not feelings. With respect, our data proves otherwise. I slid a chart across his desk. 7 years of analysis shows that clients who report emotional connection to our service renew at 83% versus 27% for those who only report satisfaction with results. James glanced at the chart for approximately half a second before pushing it back toward me. I'm sure that's an interesting perspective, but I think we need to focus on more measurable metrics moving forward. I'm reassigning your team to pricing optimization effective immediately. That's not our expertise, I said carefully. We're behavior prediction specialists. Mike Thompson's team handles pricing. I've already spoken with Mike. He'll be transitioning to lead the Consolidated Data Infrastructure Division. James looked down at his phone, signaling that the topic was closed. One more thing. I noticed you tend to use a lot of personal language in your reports. We believe, and our analysis suggests, in business communication, objective language creates more confidence, something to work on. The conversation was so absurd I almost laughed. He was criticizing my language while dismissing 7 years of hard data because it didn't fit his preconception. But I kept my face expressionless, a skill I'd perfected through countless meetings where I was the only woman at the table. I understand, I said, gathering my untouched presentation materials. Anything else? That's all for now. We'll regroup next week to review your transition plan. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I walked out of his office with my shoulders back and head high. But inside, something had shifted. This wasn't just another reorganization. This was the systematic dismantling of work I'd poured my heart into. Work that was demonstrably successful by every metric that should matter. Back at my desk, I found an email waiting for me. The subject line read, "Team Restructuring, Confidential." I opened it to find a detailed plan for reassigning my team members to various departments, effective the following Monday. My own name appeared under Transitional Support, 90 days. with no position listed afterward. I was being phased out. No direct termination, just gradually pushed into irrelevance until leaving seemed like my own idea. The realization should have devastated me. Maybe it would have, 6 months earlier. But 6 months earlier, I hadn't discovered something crucial about Horizon Analytics, something that changed my entire perspective. It had started innocently enough. I was researching historical client patterns for a presentation and needed access to the original company formation documents. Our head of legal, Rachel, who'd become something of a mentor to me, helped me navigate the archival system. While searching for those records, I stumbled upon the company's founding agreements and investment structure. Most employees knew the basics. Horizon was started 15 years ago by 3 partners who'd since moved on to other ventures, selling their stakes to various investment groups. What most didn't know, what I discovered buried in those documents, was a peculiar provision regarding the company's predictive algorithms. Any proprietary algorithm developed by employees remained partially controlled by those employees, with a mandatory consultation clause for major modifications or licensing. It was an unusual arrangement, included because the founders had previously lost control of their work at another company. They'd built this protection into Horizon's foundation to prevent history from repeating itself. Most importantly, these rights were transferable, meaning the creators could assign them to others or even sell them, and the provision had never been removed from the company charter, even as ownership changed hands multiple times. I'd mentioned this casually to Rachel over lunch. "That's fascinating, but mostly irrelevant now," she'd said. "The company owns all work product outright through the standard employment agreements." "Actually," I'd replied, scrolling through my employment contract on my phone, "mine doesn't say that. It references the original company charter regarding intellectual property." I showed her the clause. Rachel had stared at the screen, then at me. "Sarah, do you know what this means? Your client prediction model falls under the founder provision," I'd finished for her. "I know." What I didn't tell Rachel was that I'd already consulted an intellectual property attorney. I knew exactly what rights I had over the algorithm that now generated nearly half of Horizon's revenue. I also knew that the quarterly executive meeting was coming up, where they would discuss the company's plans to license our prediction technology to other firms, a move that, according to the charter, required my explicit written consent. But I'd kept this information to myself. It wasn't time yet. After leaving James's office that day, I called Mike and asked him to meet me at the coffee shop across the street after work. Mike had been my closest ally at Horizon since we'd collaborated on the original algorithm. Brilliant, principled, and perpetually underestimated because of his unassuming demeanor, he was the only person I trusted completely in the company. The coffee shop was busy with the after-work crowd when Mike slid into the seat across from me, 2 espressos in hand. "So," he said without preamble, "you've seen the restructuring plan." I nodded. "Elegant, isn't it? No direct firing, just strategic obsolescence." "James has been bringing in his people from Bluestream for weeks," Mike said, voice low. "They're systematically replacing anyone who challenges his approach. Yesterday he told me our data collection methods were unnecessarily comprehensive and that we should focus on action-oriented metrics, whatever that means." "It means metrics that support the conclusions he's already reached," I said, taking a sip of my espresso. "Have you seen the new client dashboard mock-ups? They've eliminated all the emotional response tracking." Mike shook his head. "Short-sighted. Those indicators have been our most accurate predictors." "Exactly." I hesitated, then decided it was time. "Mike, there's something I haven't told you. Something important." His eyebrows raised. Why do I feel like I'm about to hear either very good news or very bad news? Maybe both. I pulled out my tablet and opened a secure folder. Remember, when we were building the prediction algorithm and legal made us sign all those additional forms? Vaguely. There were about 1,000 documents during that period. They weren't standard IP agreements. They were special forms referencing the original company charter. I turned the tablet toward him, showing the highlighted section. According to this, we retain significant rights over the algorithm, including mandatory consultation for modifications and licensure. Mike read silently, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief. This can't be enforceable. The company would never allow... It is enforceable. I've had it reviewed by 3 separate attorneys. The provision was written into the company's DNA by the founders and never removed. He looked up at me, understanding dawning. And the licensing deal? They're planning for next quarter. Requires our written approval, I finished. Which James Wilson doesn't know. Mike sat back, running a hand through his hair. Sarah, this is monumental, but also dangerous. If they find out we know before we've secured our position. That's why I'm telling you now. Things are accelerating. I leaned forward. There's more. These rights are transferable. Meaning we could, hypothetically, sell them to someone else. Someone not currently affiliated with Horizon. Mike's eyes widened slightly. I'm not suggesting anything yet, I said carefully. I'm just making you aware of all the variables, as any good analyst would. He studied my face for a long moment. You've always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. What's your actual plan here? I smiled for what felt like the first time that day. First, we document everything. Every interaction with James, every change to our roles, every modification to the algorithms. Second, we quietly reach out to our contacts in the industry to gauge interest in our particular skill set. Third, we wait for them to make a critical mistake. And you think they will? James Wilson has been at Horizon for 6 weeks and has already dismissed 7 years of data because it includes the word emotional. Men like him always make mistakes. They can't help themselves. Mike nodded slowly. All right, I'm with you. But Sarah, be careful. Corporate politics can get ugly, and James seems like the vindictive type. I'm counting on it, I said, closing my tablet. His vindictiveness will be his downfall. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Most of the lights were still off, the cleaning crew just finishing their rounds. I liked this time of day, the quiet productivity before the chaos of meetings and interruptions. I had just settled at my desk when my phone buzzed with a calendar notification. All hands meeting, 9:30 a.m., mandatory attendance. No prior notice, no agenda provided. Classic intimidation tactic. By 9:25, the large conference room was filled with uncertain faces. Teams clustered together, whispering theories about the sudden meeting. At exactly 9:30, James strode in, flanked by 2 people I didn't recognize, and Lisa from HR, whose expression was carefully blank. Good morning, everyone, James began without preamble. I want to introduce you to Kevin Chen and Alicia Domingo, who are joining us from Bluestream Tech as part of our new strategic direction. They'll be heading up our revamped analytics and client services divisions, respectively. I felt rather than saw the shock ripple through the room. Those were positions currently held by longtime Horizon employees, people sitting right there in the meeting. As part of this transition, James continued, we'll be implementing a new organizational structure effective immediately. Your direct supervisors will provide details this afternoon. I expect everyone's full cooperation during this change. His eyes scanned the room, briefly landing on me. I met his gaze evenly, my expression neutral. He looked away first. One final note, he added. We're implementing new communication protocols for client interactions. All client-facing materials must now go through the approval process outlined in the document being sent to you shortly. This will ensure we present a consistent, fact-based approach to our market. Translation: Everything would now be filtered through James's perspective, stripped of any language or metrics he deemed too emotional. As the meeting dispersed, I noticed Mike signaling me with a slight nod toward the door. I followed him to the small meeting room we often used for private conversations. "They're accelerating the timeline," he said once the door closed. "James just pulled me aside to inform me that I'm being moved to special projects effective today. My team is being absorbed by Kevin." "Special projects is corporate speak for professional limbo," I said. "Did he mention me?" "No, but Kevin did. He asked about the algorithm woman and whether you'd be difficult to manage during the transition." I raised an eyebrow. "The algorithm woman? Charming. What did you tell him?" "That you're the most professional person in the company, and that anyone who underestimates you is making a serious error in judgment." Mike smiled slightly, though I phrased it more diplomatically. "I appreciate the vote of confidence." I checked my watch. "I have a meeting with Rachel in legal in 15 minutes. Keep documenting everything, especially any changes they make to the algorithm without consulting us." "Already on it. I've set up a secure cloud storage account that only we can access." Mike hesitated. "Sarah, be honest. How bad is this going to get?" I considered the question carefully. "On a scale of 1 to 10, we're currently at a 3, headed rapidly toward an 8. But if we play this right, we can turn it into a 12 in our favor." He nodded. "I trust your judgment. You've gotten us through tough situations before." "This is different," I admitted. "This is calculated and personal." "But Mike, I didn't build our life's work to watch it be dismantled by someone who doesn't even understand it." "Then we won't let that happen," he said simply. My meeting with Rachel confirmed what I'd suspected. Legal was being systematically cut out of key decisions. "They've brought in their own counsel from Bluestream," she told me, voice low even in her private office. "I'm being copied on emails after decisions are made, not before." "Are they aware of the intellectual property provisions in the charter?" I asked. "If they are, they haven't mentioned it to me." She frowned. "Sarah, be careful. I've seen this pattern before at other companies. They're positioning for something big, and they're removing obstacles." "We're the obstacles," I said. "Oh, anyone who knows the true value of the algorithm and how it actually works." Rachel nodded grimly. "Precisely. They want to repackage it, possibly license it out, and take credit for the innovation, without understanding that the emotional metrics are what make it effective in the first place," I added. "Exactly. It's like removing the engine from a car and expecting it to still drive because you've given it a new paint job." She hesitated, then added, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there's an executive retreat next weekend. James has asked me to prepare documents relating to the algorithm's ownership structure, but specifically instructed me to focus on the company's rights, not any individual contributors." I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. Interesting timing. I thought so too. Rachel gave me a meaningful look. "If I were you, I'd make sure my personal records were extremely thorough right now." "They always are," I assured her, "but I appreciate the reminder." Back at my desk, I found an email from James requesting a complete handover of all my project files by the end of the day. No explanation, no context, just a directive as if I were a junior analyst instead of the person who had designed the system that powered the company's growth. I responded politely that I would need at least a week to properly document everything, given the complexity of the systems. His reply came within minutes. "No extensions. Complete the transfer today, or HR will get involved." It was the kind of naked intimidation tactic that would have worked on me years ago, before I'd learned how these power games operated. Now, it just confirmed my assessment of him as insecure and overreaching. I spent the rest of the day carefully preparing file transfers, comprehensive enough to seem compliant, but structured in a way that only made sense if you already understood the underlying methodology. Without my contextual knowledge, the files were technically complete, but practically indecipherable. As I worked, I noticed a pattern of people being called into meetings with HR, returning to quickly gather their things, and being escorted out by security. The purge had begun in earnest. At 5:45 p.m., James appeared at my desk. "Sarah, a word?" He didn't wait for a response before walking toward his office, clearly expecting me to follow. His office door closed behind us with an ominous click. "I've reviewed what you sent over," he said without preamble. "It's inadequate. Where are the core algorithm specifications?" "They're included in the documentation," I replied calmly. "Section 3.2 covers the fundamental architecture." "There's nothing usable there," he countered, voice rising slightly. "It's all theoretical frameworks without practical implementation guides." I maintained my composure. The practical implementation is embedded in the code itself, which was included in the transfer. The documentation explains the methodology behind it. "Don't play games with me." James leaned forward, hands flat on his desk. "I need the simplified version that anyone could understand and implement." And there it was, the admission that he didn't understand the system he was trying to control. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction before responding. "There is no simplified version, James. The algorithm works precisely because it's complex, because it integrates hundreds of variables that most people would dismiss as irrelevant. That's its value." His jaw tightened. "I think you're deliberately withholding information, Sarah. That's insubordination." "I've provided everything the company is entitled to," I said carefully. "If you're having trouble understanding it, I'd be happy to explain the methodology in more detail." The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. His face flushed slightly. "That won't be necessary. In fact, I've been meaning to discuss your role here." He straightened, regaining his composure. "Horizon is moving in a different direction, one that requires a more objective, less emotionally driven approach to analytics. Data isn't emotional, James. Interpretation can be, but our methodology is rigorously tested and validated. Nevertheless," he continued as if I hadn't spoken, "we've decided that your position is being eliminated as part of our restructuring. Lisa will meet with you tomorrow to discuss severance options." There it was. Despite expecting it, the words still landed like a physical blow. 7 years of my life, dismissed in a single sentence by someone who had been at the company for less than 2 months. "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And the client prediction algorithm? Who will maintain that?" "We have capable people who can handle it." His tone suggested the conversation was over. I nodded slowly, then stood. "I understand. I'll be ready to meet with Lisa tomorrow." As I reached for the door, James added, "One more thing, Sarah. I think your reaction to these changes has been unnecessarily emotional. In business, these decisions aren't personal. They're just business." I turned back to face him, allowing myself one small moment of genuine response. "You know, James, dismissing something as emotional is often just a way of saying you don't understand its value. Our most successful clients would disagree with your assessment." His expression hardened. "Clear your desk by noon tomorrow. Security will escort you out." I left his office with my head high, walking slowly past the remaining team members, many of whom avoided eye contact, partly from embarrassment, partly from fear they might be next. Only Mike met my gaze directly, giving me an almost imperceptible nod. The plan was in motion. James had made exactly the mistake I'd been waiting for. That evening, I sat in my apartment overlooking the Chicago River, the city lights reflecting on the water as I made the most important phone call of my career. The number I dialed belonged to Jennifer Davis, CEO of Riverview Capital, a mid-sized investment firm I'd met at an industry conference last year. We'd stayed in touch, occasionally exchanging ideas about market trends. "Sarah, this is unexpected," she answered. "Everything all right?" Actually, I'm calling with an opportunity, I replied. How familiar are you with Horizon Analytics? Reasonably familiar. Solid mid-market firm, good growth trajectory. They've developed some impressive predictive technology. Yes, they have. Technology that I designed and built, which is now being systematically dismantled by new management. I took a deep breath. Jennifer, I've been terminated, effective tomorrow. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, her tone shifting to one of genuine concern. That seems short-sighted on their part. It gets more interesting, I continued. Due to an unusual provision in Horizon's founding charter, I retain significant rights over the algorithm that now generates nearly half their revenue. Rights that include mandatory consultation for modifications and licensing. The line went silent for a moment. And the new management doesn't know this? They suspect something. They're researching it now. But they don't know that I've documented every violation of the provision over the past 6 weeks. Or that I've had 3 separate law firms confirm my position. Jennifer's voice took on the careful precision of someone recognizing a pivotal moment. Sarah, what exactly are you proposing? Horizon is planning to license my algorithm to other firms next quarter, a move that legally requires my consent I won't be giving. Moreover, I'm prepared to enforce my rights through legal channels if necessary. Creating a significant problem for them, Jennifer noted. But where does Riverview Capital come into this? I'm offering you the opportunity to purchase my rights to the algorithm. Rights that would give you leverage over Horizon and potentially a significant stake in their future. That's a bold proposal, she said thoughtfully. What's your asking price? I named a figure that made her inhale sharply. That's substantial, Sarah. So is the technology's value. Horizon's entire growth strategy depends on it. Without proper maintenance from people who understand its nuances, its effectiveness will degrade within months. People like you and Mike Thompson, she said, demonstrating that she'd done her homework on Horizon's key players. Exactly. And if we acquired these rights, what would prevent Horizon from simply developing a new algorithm? Time, I answered confidently. It took us 3 years to build and refine this one, with intimate knowledge of the client base and behavioral patterns. They could eventually create something new, but not before losing significant market share and client confidence. Another thoughtful silence. I'll need to discuss this with my team. Can you send over the documentation? Confidentially, of course. I'll have it to you within the hour, I promised. But Jennifer, this is time sensitive. Once I'm escorted, from the building tomorrow, my leverage changes. Understood. I'll call you back before midnight. True to her word, my phone rang at 11:43 p.m. I answered immediately. Our legal team has reviewed the documents, Jennifer said without preamble. Your position appears solid. We're prepared to make an offer. She named a figure slightly below my asking price. I countered with a compromise. After a brief negotiation, we settled on terms that included not just the purchase of my rights, but also consulting positions for both Mike and me at Riverview. We'll have the papers drawn up immediately, Jennifer said. Can you meet tomorrow afternoon? Absolutely. One more thing, Sarah, she added before hanging up. We're not just buying rights here. We're investing in you and your vision. I expect this is just the beginning of our collaboration. I believe you're right, I replied, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I arrived at Horizon Analytics for the last time, carrying a small box for my personal items. I'd already transferred anything truly important to secure storage. This box was for show, a few framed photos, a plant, miscellaneous desk items that held no real significance. Lisa from HR was waiting by my desk, her expression a practiced blend of professional sympathy and detachment. Sarah, I'm sorry about this situation. If you'll come with me, we can discuss your severance package. I followed her to a small conference room where the paperwork was already prepared. A security guard waited discreetly by the door. Standard procedure for terminations, but still a final indignity. The severance offer was insultingly low, 3 weeks' pay in exchange for signing away all claims against the company. I reviewed the document carefully, noting the broad intellectual property clauses. "I'll need to have my attorney review this before signing," I said, folding the papers and placing them in my bag. Lisa looked uncomfortable. "We were hoping to resolve this today." "I understand, but given the circumstances, I need to ensure my interests are protected." I stood, extending my hand. "Thank you for your help, Lisa. I know you're just doing your job." Her handshake was tentative, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "Security will escort you out now." As we walked through the office, I noticed James, watching from his glass-walled office, arms crossed, expression satisfied. I gave him a small, enigmatic smile that clearly unsettled him, not the reaction he expected from someone being marched out of the building they'd helped build. Mike was waiting by the elevator, ostensibly engaged with his phone. As I passed, he murmured, "Good luck," just loudly enough for me to hear. "See you soon," I replied softly. Outside, the spring air felt different somehow, lighter, full of possibility rather than constraint. I had just hailed a cab when my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Papers ready. Meeting set for 2 p.m. I looked back at the Horizon Analytics building one last time. James Wilson thought he had won, that he had successfully eliminated an emotional woman who challenged his authority. What he didn't realize was that I had been 3 steps ahead of him from the beginning. The real victory wasn't just about keeping my rights to the algorithm. It was about refusing to be diminished by someone who confused confidence with competence. It was about recognizing my own value in an industry that often didn't. And most importantly, it was about being prepared for the moment when someone like James Wilson would make the critical mistake of underestimating me. The cab pulled away from the curb, carrying me toward a meeting that would change not just my future, but Horizon's as well. I hadn't wanted things to end this way. I had loved building something meaningful at Horizon. But if James Wilson thought I was too emotional about my work, he was about to discover just how rational and strategic I could be when it really mattered. The Riverview Capital offices occupied the 32nd floor of a sleek downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. The reception area exuded quiet confidence. Modern furnishings in muted grays and blues. Abstract artwork that suggested innovation without being ostentatious. This wasn't a place that needed to announce its importance. It simply was important. I straightened my blazer as the receptionist led me to the conference room where Jennifer Davis waited. Unlike our previous meetings at industry events, this wasn't a casual conversation over coffee. This was business, and I had come prepared. Jennifer rose to greet me, her handshake firm and direct. At 45, she had built Riverview Capital from a small advisory firm into a respected investment company known for spotting undervalued technological assets. Her reputation for shrewd but ethical dealings had always impressed me. "Sarah, thank you for coming." She gestured to the chairs around the polished conference table where 3 other people waited. "This is Marcus Reeves, our head of legal, Diane Choi, who leads our tech investments, and Carlos Mendez, our chief strategist." I greeted each of them, noting the array of documents spread across the table. Marcus, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, spoke first. "We've thoroughly reviewed the materials you provided, Ms. Mitchell. I must say it's an unusual situation, but the legal foundation of your position is remarkably solid." "Unusual situations sometimes create unusual opportunities," I replied, taking the seat across from Jennifer. Diane Choi, whose reputation for identifying valuable tech acquisitions was well known in investment circles, leaned forward. "Before we proceed, I'd like to understand more about the algorithm itself. What makes it so uniquely valuable that Horizon's growth depends on it?" It was the question I'd been waiting for, the chance to explain what James Wilson had never bothered to understand. Traditional market prediction models focus primarily on quantitative data, purchasing patterns, pricing elasticity, market trends. What makes our algorithm different is the integration of qualitative emotional response metrics. I opened my laptop and turned it toward them, displaying a complex visualization. We discovered that client retention isn't primarily driven by satisfaction with results, but by emotional connection to the service experience. Carlos studied the screen with interest. And how do you quantify something as subjective as emotional connection? That's the innovation. We developed a framework that identifies and weighs over 200 micro-interactions between clients and service providers. Each interaction is assigned an emotional value based on linguistic analysis, response timing, follow-up engagement, and dozens of other factors. The algorithm then correlates these values with retention outcomes, continuously refining its predictive accuracy. I continued, explaining the methodology in detail, watching their expressions shift from professional interest to genuine engagement. Unlike James, who had dismissed the emotional component as irrelevant, these people immediately grasped its value. The results speak for themselves, I concluded. Client retention increased 68% in the first year after implementation, and new client acquisition through referrals rose 42%. The ROI is unambiguous. Yet Horizon's new management is dismantling this system? Jennifer asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. James Wilson comes from a traditional analytics background. He believes business decisions are purely rational, that emotional factors are— I paused, choosing my words carefully. A distraction from what he considers real data. A perspective not supported by contemporary behavioral economics, Carlos noted. Exactly. But more importantly, his approach fundamentally misunderstands what makes the algorithm effective. By removing the emotional metrics, he's essentially breaking the engine while believing he's just removing unnecessary ornamentation. Marcus tapped a document in front of him. According to the provision in Horizon's charter, any substantial modification to the algorithm requires your written consent. Have they formally requested this? No. James doesn't even appear to be aware of the provision. He's proceeding as if he has complete authority to alter or license the technology. Which constitutes a breach of the agreement, Marcus concluded. A significant one. Jennifer exchanged glances with her colleagues, a silent communication flowing between them. Then she turned back to me. Sarah, we're prepared to move forward with the acquisition of your rights as discussed. In addition, we'd like to offer consulting positions to both you and Mike Thompson, should he be interested. He will be, I assured her, thinking of the text Mike had sent me that morning. 3 more people let go today, working on archiving everything we discussed, ready when you are. For the next hour, we reviewed the legal documents formalizing the transfer of my algorithm rights to Riverview Capital. The terms were fair, better than fair, actually. The financial compensation was substantial, the consulting arrangement generous, and most importantly, the agreement included provisions for how and when Riverview would assert its newly acquired rights with Horizon. We propose waiting until Horizon announces its licensing plans publicly, Jennifer explained. Strategically, that gives us the strongest position. I nodded in agreement. Their quarterly board meeting is next Friday. Based on what I've heard, they plan to announce the licensing initiative then. Perfect timing, she replied. We'll have everything in place by then. After signing the final documents, Jennifer walked me to the elevator. Away from her team, her formal demeanor softened slightly. I've followed your work for some time, Sarah. What happened at Horizon is unfortunately common, visionary work undermined by leadership that lacks the capacity to understand it. Thank you for recognizing its value, I said simply. Riverview doesn't just recognize it. We intend to build on it. She handed me a key card. This will give you access to our research facilities. We've prepared office space for you and Mike, whenever you're ready to begin. As the elevator doors closed, I felt a tension I'd been carrying for weeks finally release. The uncertainty about my future, the frustration of watching my work being dismantled, it was replaced by something that felt remarkably like freedom. The power dynamic had shifted, though James Wilson didn't yet know it. I spent the weekend in a strange state of calm anticipation. I cleaned my apartment thoroughly, organized my research notes, went for long runs along Lake Michigan. I didn't check my work email. Technically, I no longer had work email, but Mike kept me updated with periodic texts. Kevin asked for complete algorithm documentation, gave him exactly what you gave James. 3 more Bluestream people started today. Executive suite being renovated. James announced exciting new licensing opportunities at Friday's department meeting, said innovation is about bold action, not endless analysis. Each message confirmed that events were unfolding exactly as anticipated. James was accelerating his plans, unaware of the legal minefield he was walking into. On Sunday evening, I received a call from Rachel in legal. Sarah, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I thought you should know. They're announcing the algorithm licensing deal on Friday. They've already pre-briefed 2 industry publications. That's not overstepping, I assured her. Has anyone in legal raised concerns about intellectual property rights? I tried, she said, frustration evident in her voice. I prepared a memo about the founder provision and your potential rights under it. James dismissed it as legacy legal language that doesn't apply to current operations. When I insisted, he said they'd brought in specialized counsel who disagreed with my interpretation. I wasn't surprised. Men like James rarely let legal concerns interfere with their ambitions, especially when they'd already convinced themselves those concerns weren't valid. What are you going to do? Rachel asked after a pause. Let's just say I've taken appropriate steps to protect my interests, I replied. And Rachel, thank you for everything. Monday morning brought unexpected news. Mike called early, his voice pitched lower than usual. James just fired Lisa from HR. Apparently, she raised concerns about the termination process for the algorithm team. That seems excessive, even for him, I noted. Any other developments? They've scheduled a press briefing for Friday at 2 p.m. right after the board meeting. And Sarah, they're calling the licensing initiative Project Clarity. On their marketing materials specifically mention removing subjective elements from predictive analytics. Removing the very components that make it effective, I said, shaking my head even though Mike couldn't see me. Has Kevin made any actual changes to the algorithm yet? He's trying, but he doesn't understand the underlying architecture well enough. He keeps asking me for the simplified version. I laughed despite myself. There is no simplified version. That's what James doesn't get. Exactly. But Sarah, they're pushing hard. Kevin mentioned bringing in external developers to streamline the code, which would constitute another clear violation of the provision, I noted. Keep documenting everything, Mike. Friday is going to be interesting. On Wednesday, Jennifer called to confirm that Riverview's preparations were complete. Our legal team will attend Horizon's press briefing on Friday. We've also prepared communication for their board and major shareholders, explaining our position and the implications for the company's operations going forward. How do you think they'll respond? I asked. Initially with shock, possibly denial. Then when they realize the severity of the situation, with an urgent desire to negotiate. Companies in Horizon's position typically follow a predictable pattern. First they threaten, then they bluster, finally they come to the table. We're prepared for all 3 phases. Her confidence was reassuring. This wasn't just about my personal vindication anymore. It was about rectifying a fundamental misunderstanding about how value is created in modern business. James Wilson represented an outdated mindset that dismissed emotional intelligence as irrelevant to success, a perspective that had caused countless innovative ideas to be undervalued or discarded. Thursday brought an unexpected development. Mike called during his lunch break, speaking quietly as if concerned about being overheard. "Sarah, something's happening. James has been in closed-door meetings all morning. The press briefing has been moved up to 10 a.m. tomorrow, and they've added a special executive session before the board meeting." Did something leak? I wondered aloud. I don't think so. But Rachel just got called into a meeting with their outside counsel. She texted me that they were asking detailed questions about the algorithm's development history. "They're finally doing their due diligence," I said. "About 6 weeks too late." "What should I do?" "Nothing different. Continue as planned. If they approach you directly about the legal provision, refer them to me as the primary rights holder." "Got it. One more thing. James asked me to prepare a technical presentation for the board meeting tomorrow. First time he's acknowledged my existence in weeks." I smiled at the irony. "I wonder if he's starting to realize he might need you." "Too little, too late," Mike replied, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. Friday morning dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect early summer days that Chicago produces to make residents forget about the brutal winters. I dressed carefully in a navy suit I'd purchased specifically for this occasion. Professional, confident, but not ostentatious. Today wasn't about intimidation. It was about clarity. At 9:30 a.m., I met Jennifer and Marcus in the lobby of Horizon's building. They were accompanied by 2 other Riverview executives I hadn't met before, all projecting the calm authority of people who knew they held the upper hand. "Our PR team is already in position," Jennifer informed me as we rode the elevator to the press briefing floor. "As soon as Horizon makes their announcement, we'll issue our statement clarifying the ownership, structure of the technology." The press room was already crowded when we arrived. Industry reporters, technology bloggers, even a few financial analysts. We took seats near the back, intentionally inconspicuous. I noticed Rachel across the room, her expression tense as she conferred with another member of Horizon's legal team. At precisely 10 a.m., James Wilson strode onto the small stage, flanked by Kevin and Alicia from Bluestream. His confident smile faltered momentarily when he scanned the audience and noticed me, but he quickly recovered. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying that practiced executive cadence. "Today marks an exciting new chapter for Horizon Analytics. I'm pleased to announce that we are launching Project Clarity, a groundbreaking initiative to license our proprietary predictive analytics technology to select partners across multiple industries." He continued, describing the revolutionary potential of technology he barely understood, promising unprecedented accuracy while systematically dismantling the very features that made that accuracy possible. It was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak, impressive sounding but fundamentally hollow. "At the heart of this initiative," James concluded, "is our commitment to data-driven, objective analytics unencumbered by subjective interpretations. We're removing the noise to focus on what truly matters, measurable, actionable insights that drive bottom-line results." As the applause died down and James opened the floor for questions, Jennifer nodded to Marcus, who stood and raised his hand. James, not recognizing him, called on him immediately. "Marcus Reeves, legal counsel for Riverview Capital," he introduced himself, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Mr. Wilson, could you clarify Horizon's position regarding the intellectual property rights associated with the algorithm you're planning to license? Specifically, how are you addressing the founder provision that requires written consent from the original developers for any substantial modification or third-party licensing?" The room went completely silent. James stared at Marcus, momentarily, speechless before recovering. "I'm not familiar with any such provision. Our legal team has confirmed that Horizon holds all rights to the technology in question." With respect, Marcus continued, unruffled. The provision is explicitly outlined in Horizon's founding charter, Section 7.3, and has never been amended or removed. As of yesterday, those rights have been legally transferred to Riverview, capital by the original developer, Sarah Mitchell. All eyes in the room turned to me. I maintained a neutral expression, meeting James's increasingly alarmed gaze steadily. This is preposterous, he stammered. A disgruntled former employee making baseless claims won't derail our strategic initiative. Jennifer stood then, her presence commanding immediate attention. This isn't a claim, Mr. Wilson. It's a legal fact. Riverview Capital now holds exclusive rights to authorize or prohibit modifications and licensing of the algorithm Horizon has been using. We have notified your board of directors and are prepared to enforce these rights through all available legal channels. The room erupted in murmurs and hurried typing as reporters captured this unexpected development. A representative from Horizon's PR team rushed to the stage, whispering urgently to James, who had gone pale. This briefing is concluded, he announced abruptly. We'll issue a clarifying statement shortly. As he hurried from the stage, I caught Rachel's eye across the room. She gave me a subtle nod, the ghost of a smile playing at her lips. Outside the press room, chaos ensued. Reporters clustered around Jennifer and Marcus, seeking details about Riverview's claim. Horizon executives huddled in corners, speaking in urgent whispers. Through the commotion, I watched James being summoned to an impromptu meeting with board members who had been present for the announcement. Phase 1 complete, Jennifer said quietly as she rejoined me. They'll be calling us within the hour. She was right. Exactly 47 minutes later, as we sat in Riverview's offices reviewing media coverage of the morning's events, Jennifer's phone rang. The caller ID showed Horizon's board chair, Eleanor Richards. Jennifer put the call on speaker. Eleanor, good to hear from you. I have Sarah Mitchell with me, along with our legal counsel. Jennifer. Eleanor's voice was tightly controlled. I think we need to discuss this situation immediately. Our legal team has reviewed the documents you sent over. While we have some questions about interpretation, we acknowledge that there are complexities we need to address. I appreciate your prompt response, Jennifer replied. We're available to meet at your convenience. How about 2 p.m. today, in person, at our offices? Jennifer glanced at me and I nodded. That works for us. We'll see you then. As she ended the call, Jennifer turned to me. They're moving. Faster than I expected. The board must be putting significant pressure on management. Eleanor is pragmatic, I explained. She's been with Horizon since the beginning. If she's reviewed the provision, she knows exactly how strong our position is. The next few hours passed in careful preparation. Marcus and his team refined our negotiation strategy, while Jennifer briefed me on Riverview's longer-term vision for the technology. At 1:45 p.m., we returned to Horizon's building, this time heading directly to the executive floor. The contrast with my departure just days earlier was striking. Then I had been escorted out by security, carrying a box of meaningless personal items. Now, I was welcomed by the board chair's executive assistant and shown to the main boardroom, where Eleanor Richards waited along with 3 other board members, Horizon's general counsel, and, looking distinctly uncomfortable, James Wilson. Thank you for coming, Eleanor began once introductions were complete. We find ourselves in an unusual situation that I believe requires mutual good faith to resolve. We agree, Jennifer replied smoothly. Riverview values transparent, constructive dialogue. Eleanor turned to me, her expression a mixture of respect and regret. Sarah, I want to acknowledge that there appears to have been a significant oversight in how your contributions to Horizon were handled. The board was not fully informed about your role in developing the algorithm, nor about the applicable provisions in our charter. James shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but remained silent. "I appreciate that acknowledgement," I said, keeping my tone professional rather than triumphant. "The algorithm represents years of innovative work, not just by me, but by a dedicated team of people who understood that effective predictive analytics must incorporate both quantitative and qualitative factors. That's precisely what we want." "To discuss," Eleanor continued. "Our legal team confirms that Riverview now holds the rights previously assigned to you. We need to understand your intentions regarding Horizon's continued use of the technology." Jennifer took the lead, outlining Riverview's position clearly. "We recognize the algorithm's importance to Horizon's operations. We're not seeking to disrupt your business unnecessarily. However, we do require 3 things. First, proper acknowledgement of the original development team. Second, preservation of the algorithm's core methodological framework, including the emotional metrics components. And third, a fair licensing arrangement that reflects the technology's true value." "And if we don't agree to these terms?" Horizon's general counsel asked. "Then Riverview would be forced to exercise its right to revoke Horizon's permission to use the algorithm in any capacity," Marcus stated plainly. "Given that it currently powers approximately 40% of your operations, I imagine that would create significant disruption." The board members exchanged glances. Eleanor turned to James. "Mr. Wilson, you assured the board that your modifications to the analytics department would enhance performance. Did you conduct a full intellectual property review before implementing these changes?" James's confident facade finally cracked. "We were advised that standard employment agreements covered all proprietary technology. The founder provision wasn't flagged as a material concern." "It was flagged," I interjected calmly, "by Rachel in your legal department. You dismissed her concerns as irrelevant." James flushed but didn't deny it. Eleanor's expression hardened as she turned back to us. "Jennifer, Sarah, we need some time to discuss this internally. Would you be willing to give us an hour?" "Of course," Jennifer agreed. "We'll wait in the reception area." As we left the boardroom, I caught a final glimpse of James, his posture deflated as Eleanor turned to him with an expression that clearly communicated the seriousness of his error. In the reception area, Jennifer received a text from Carlos at Riverview. "Horizon's stock is down 4% just on rumors about the press conference confrontation. Their investor relations team is fielding calls. The market responds quickly to uncertainty," Jennifer observed, "especially when it involves core intellectual property." Just over 40 minutes later, we were called back into the boardroom. The energy had shifted noticeably. James Wilson was absent, and Eleanor now sat at the center of the table, clearly in charge. "After careful consideration," she began, "the board recognizes that we need to resolve this situation in a manner that respects the rights Riverview has acquired while ensuring Horizon's operational stability. We're prepared to discuss terms for a formal licensing agreement." The negotiation that followed was intense but productive. By late afternoon, we had outlined the framework for an arrangement that would allow Horizon to continue using the algorithm under specific conditions. The original development team would be formally credited in all materials. The emotional metrics component would be preserved, and Horizon would pay Riverview a substantial annual licensing fee. Most significantly, Horizon agreed to create an algorithm integrity committee that would include Mike and me as consultants, with oversight authority for any proposed modifications to the system. As the meeting concluded, Eleanor asked to speak with me privately. When the room had cleared, she came directly to the point. "James Wilson has been relieved of his duties, effective immediately. His mishandling of this situation has cost Horizon dearly, not just financially, but in terms of trust and credibility." I nodded, unsurprised. "I didn't set out to cause disruption, Eleanor. I simply wanted recognition for the work my team had done, and protection for the methodology we'd developed." "I understand that now," she acknowledged. "And I regret that it took such extreme measures to bring these issues to light." The board should have exercised more oversight when James began making sweeping changes. "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll issue a statement clarifying that Horizon and Riverview have reached an agreement regarding our analytics technology. We'll emphasize the collaborative nature of the arrangement and the continued innovation it will enable." She paused, then added, "We'd also like to formally apologize to the team members who were let go during the recent restructuring and offer reinstatement to those who wish to return." "That's a significant step," I noted, genuinely impressed. "It's the right step," Eleanor replied. "Sarah, one more thing. What James said about your work being too emotional was not just incorrect, it was fundamentally misguided. The very elements he disparaged are what make the algorithm valuable. The board understands that now." I smiled, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. "Thank you for saying that, Eleanor. It matters." As I left Horizon's building for what might be the last time as an employee, though not as a consultant, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also a kind of gratitude for the challenge that had forced me to fully recognize and assert my own value. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Just heard the news. James is out. Board is doing damage control. Tell me everything." I smiled as I replied, "The full story requires wine. Dinner tonight?" Then another message arrived, this one from Jennifer. "Sarah, when you're ready, come by Riverview. There's something else I'd like to discuss about your future." I paused, on the sidewalk, looking up at the gleaming buildings that housed both Horizon and Riverview. One chapter was ending, but another was just beginning. One where my work would be valued not despite its emotional intelligence, but because of it. James Wilson had dismissed me as too emotional about my work. What he never understood was that caring deeply about what you create isn't a weakness. It's the foundation of true innovation. And sometimes, it's what allows you to change the game entirely. 2 weeks after the Horizon confrontation, I found myself in Riverview Capital's gleaming research facility, surrounded by multiple displays showing real-time data visualizations. The space Jennifer had arranged for me was impressive. An entire corner section with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, state-of-the-art equipment, and a small team of talented analysts at my disposal. Mike occupied the adjacent office, equally well-appointed, though his was perpetually cluttered with empty coffee cups and technical manuals. "It still feels surreal," Mike commented, leaning against my doorframe. "One minute we're being pushed out of Horizon, the next we're here with bigger budgets, better equipment, and actual respect." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The transition had been swift and dramatic. After finalizing the licensing agreement with Horizon, Jennifer had moved quickly to integrate us into Riverview's operations, creating a new division focused on behavioral analytics with Mike and me at the helm. "Have you seen the latest from Horizon?" Mike asked, sliding a tablet across my desk. On the screen was an industry publication showing Eleanor Richards, Horizon's board chair, announcing a renewed commitment to human-centered analytics and the appointment of Rachel, my former ally from legal, as interim CEO, while they conducted a thorough executive search. "Rachel deserves this," I said, genuinely pleased. She was the only one who consistently tried to stop James from dismantling everything. "The company's stock is rebounding too," Mike noted. "Up 3% since they announced the new direction and the partnership with Riverview." Partnership. Such a diplomatic term for what had actually happened. The reality was more complex. Riverview now effectively controlled Horizon's core technology, but instead of wielding that power destructively, Jennifer had chosen a collaborative approach that benefited both companies. It was strategic brilliance wrapped in professionalism. Speaking of Jennifer, she appeared in my doorway, characteristically punctual for our scheduled meeting. "Sarah, Mike, how are you settling in?" "Everything's perfect," I assured her. "The team is exceptional." Glad to hear it. Sarah, do you have a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss. I followed Jennifer to her office, a spacious corner suite decorated in the same understated elegance as the rest of Riverview's spaces. As I took a seat across from her desk, I noticed a collection of financial reports open on her screen. I've been reviewing Horizon's quarterly projections, she began. Their dependency on the algorithm is even more significant than we initially estimated. Without it, they would lose approximately 52% of their current client base within 6 months. That tracks with my assessment, I confirmed. The emotional metrics component is particularly crucial for client retention in volatile market conditions. Jennifer nodded. Which brings me to my proposition. Riverview is considering a more substantial investment in Horizon, specifically acquiring a controlling interest in the company. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by the directness of the statement. That's a significant escalation from licensing their technology. It is, she agreed. But it makes strategic sense. Horizon has valuable client relationships and market presence. Combined with our financial resources and your technical expertise, we could create something truly exceptional. Have you approached Eleanor about this? Preliminary discussions only. Their board is cautiously receptive, given the alternatives. But before proceeding further, I wanted your perspective. I considered the proposition carefully. Technologically, it's sound. The algorithm would benefit from deeper integration with Riverview's financial modeling capabilities. And culturally, well, Horizon needs a reset after James Wilson's tenure. My thoughts exactly, Jennifer said, which is why I'd like you to lead the technical due diligence team if we move forward. No one understands Horizon's systems better than you do. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just weeks ago, James had dismissed me as too emotional and pushed me out of the company. Now, I was being asked to help evaluate that same company for potential acquisition. I'd be happy to lead the assessment, I told Jennifer, but I'd suggest bringing Mike in as co-lead. His infrastructure knowledge complements my prediction modeling expertise. Already planned to, Jennifer smiled. The board is meeting tomorrow to vote on authorizing a formal offer. If approved, we'll move quickly. Eleanor has indicated there may be other interested parties. As I left Jennifer's office, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically circumstances could change in a matter of weeks. The algorithm that James had tried to strip of its emotional components, the very heart of what made it valuable, was now driving one of the most significant potential acquisitions in the analytics sector this year. The following morning, Mike and I met with Riverview's financial analysis team to begin preliminary due diligence. We worked through Horizon's technical infrastructure, client contracts, intellectual property portfolio, and growth projections. Their client base is still solid, noted Diane Choi, who was overseeing the financial aspects of the assessment. But there's concerning churn in the mid-market segment since Wilson's changes were implemented. That's what happens when you strip relationship metrics from client management systems, I explained. Those mid-market clients particularly value personalized attention. The algorithm recognized that. James didn't. Can the damage be reversed? Carlos asked from the other end of the conference table. With the original methodology restored, yes, Mike confirmed, but it will take time to rebuild trust with clients who experience the degraded service. Our analysis continued for hours, gradually building a comprehensive picture of Horizon's true value, not just its current market position, but its potential if properly managed and integrated with Riverview's resources. By late afternoon, Jennifer joined us, bringing news from the board meeting. It's unanimous. We're moving forward with an acquisition offer. Initial proposal is 30% above current market value, with accelerated timeline. That's generous, I remarked, especially given their recent management issues. We're not paying for what Horizon is today, Jennifer explained. We're paying for what it can become as part of Riverview. Your algorithm is the bridge between those two states. The phrase "your algorithm" still triggered a mixture of pride and vindication. After years of having my contributions minimized or appropriated, having them explicitly acknowledged and valued was powerfully affirming. Over the next few days, our due diligence intensified. I spent hours combing through Horizon's technical documentation, identifying vulnerabilities created during James's tenure and opportunities for enhancement once the systems were reunified. Mike focused on the infrastructure implications, working closely with Riverview's IT integration specialists to develop a transition plan. On Thursday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Rachel at Horizon. "Sarah, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to give you a heads up. We've received Riverview's acquisition proposal, and the board is meeting tomorrow to review it. There's also another offer on the table." "From whom?" I asked, surprised. The industry was small enough that major moves were usually telegraphed in advance. "Bluestream Tech," Rachel replied, a note of irony in her voice. "James Wilson's former company. They've submitted a competing bid, slightly higher than Riverview's initial offer." The news was both unexpected and concerning. Bluestream had been the source of many of the problematic approaches James had tried to implement at Horizon. If they acquired the company, they would likely continue dismantling the very systems that made it valuable. "Thank you for letting me know," I told Rachel. "This is significant." "I thought you'd want to be aware," she said. "Officially, I shouldn't be sharing this information, but given your unique position, I understand, and I appreciate it. How is the board leaning?" "It's divided. The financial faction is attracted to Bluestream's higher number. The technical faction understands that Riverview's proposal, with your involvement, offers better, long-term value. Eleanor is trying to build consensus." After ending the call, I immediately sought out Jennifer. She was in a meeting, but her assistant assured me she would be available within the hour. Rather than wait, I texted her. "Bluestream has submitted competing bid for Horizon, higher than ours. Board voting tomorrow." Her response came quickly. "Already aware. Working on counter-strategy. Meet in main conference room 3 p.m. When I arrived at the conference room, I found not just Jennifer, but Riverview's entire executive leadership team, along with Marcus from legal and several financial analysts I didn't recognize. "Sarah, thank you for joining us," Jennifer greeted me. "As you've heard, we have a competitive situation developing. Bluestream has offered 34% above market for Horizon, 4% higher than our initial proposal. If they acquire Horizon, they'll implement the same approach James Wilson tried," I pointed out. "They fundamentally misunderstand what makes the algorithm valuable." "Agreed," Jennifer nodded. "But their financial offer is compelling to certain board members. We need to recalibrate our strategy." For the next 2 hours, we dissected various scenarios and options. Riverview could simply increase its bid, but that risked starting a bidding war that might drive Horizon's price beyond its reasonable value. Alternatively, we could leverage our control of the algorithm licensing to make Bluestream's acquisition less attractive. But that approach dangerously close to market manipulation. "What if we take a different approach entirely?" I suggested, as the discussion reached an impasse. "Instead of just increasing our offer, what if we restructure it to better align with Horizon's long-term interests?" What specifically are you proposing?" Jennifer asked, her expression thoughtful. "A hybrid acquisition. Initial purchase of 30% of outstanding shares at premium, with additional performance-based earnouts tied to client retention and algorithm integration milestones. Plus guaranteed positions for key Horizon personnel and profit sharing for the technical teams." The room went quiet as everyone considered the implications. It was an unconventional approach, less immediately lucrative for Horizon's shareholders, but potentially more valuable over time, especially for employees who had been sidelined under James's leadership. "It's creative," Jennifer acknowledged, "and it emphasizes exactly the values that differentiate us from Bluestream: long-term, thinking recognition of human capital and integration rather than conquest. Eleanor would support it, I added. She's always prioritized sustainable growth over quick profits. After further discussion and refinement, we formalized the revised proposal. Jennifer would personally present it to Horizon's board the following morning, emphasizing not just the financial aspects but the philosophical alignment between the companies. As the meeting concluded, Jennifer asked me to stay behind. Once we were alone, she spoke candidly. "Sarah, if this works, if we successfully acquire Horizon, I'd like you to consider a more formal leadership role in the combined organization. Your insights today demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need." "I appreciate that," I replied, somewhat surprised by the directness of the offer. "What sort of role did you have in mind?" "Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to me, overseeing not just the algorithm's integration, but the broader synthesis of Riverview's financial expertise with Horizon's predictive capabilities." It was a substantial promotion, far beyond the consulting position I currently held, and certainly beyond anything I'd been offered at Horizon, even before James's arrival. The fact that Jennifer had proposed it so matter-of-factly, without qualification or hesitation, spoke volumes about the difference in how my contributions were valued. "I'd be honored to take on that responsibility," I told her, assuming the acquisition moves forward. "We'll know tomorrow," Jennifer said. "Eleanor has scheduled the board vote for 10 a.m. That night, I found it difficult to sleep, my mind constantly returning to the upcoming decision and its implications. If Bluestream prevailed, the algorithm I'd created would likely be stripped of its most innovative components, reduced to a conventional analytics tool. If Riverview succeeded, it would be expanded and enhanced, its full potential finally recognized. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very emotional approach to data that James had dismissed was now at the center of a high-stakes corporate acquisition. The qualities he had tried to eliminate were precisely what made the technology valuable enough to fight over. Morning came with a text from Mike. "Anything new? Feeling like we're waiting for the jury to return." "Still waiting," I replied. "Board meeting starts at 10. Jennifer is presenting our revised offer personally." At 9:45, Jennifer called. "Last-minute development," she said without preamble. "Bluestream has increased their offer again. 38% premium now. They're pushing hard." "Can we match that?" I asked, knowing that at some point the numbers would exceed rational valuation. "We could," Jennifer replied, "but I'm not sure we should. At that premium, the financial justification becomes tenuous. I've asked the board for flexibility, but they're understandably concerned about overpaying." "I understand," I said, though disappointment colored my voice. "When will we know the final decision?" "Early afternoon, most likely. Eleanor wants to give both proposals full consideration." The waiting was excruciating. Mike and I tried to focus on our current projects, but our attention kept drifting to the unfolding drama across town. Rachel had gone silent, presumably bound by confidentiality during the actual board deliberations, leaving us entirely in the dark. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang again. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen. "It's done," she said, her voice betraying no emotion. "The board has made their decision." "And?" I prompted, tension coiling in my chest. "They've accepted our proposal, not the revised version, a third option that Eleanor presented, incorporating elements from our approach, but with additional protections for existing Horizon employees. We'll be acquiring 40% immediately, with a pathway to majority control over 2 years." Relief washed over me. That's fantastic news." "It is," Jennifer agreed, her tone warming. "Bluestream pushed hard at the end, offering almost 42% premium, but Eleanor convinced the board that our vision for integration was more aligned with Horizon's core values and long-term interests." "What made the difference?" I asked, genuinely. curious about how such a significant financial gap had been overcome. "You did," Jennifer said simply. "Or more specifically, your algorithm did." Rachel presented a compelling analysis showing that under Bluestream's approach, the technology would likely lose its distinctive advantage within 12 months. Under our approach, with you and Mike leading integration, its value would potentially double within the same time frame. It was the ultimate vindication. Not just that my work was valuable, but that its value had been the deciding factor in a multi-million-dollar corporate acquisition. The emotional components that James had tried to eliminate had ultimately determined Horizon's future. "We'll announce publicly tomorrow morning," Jennifer continued. "But I wanted you and Mike to hear it directly. This is as much your achievement as Riverview's." After ending the call, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Then I texted Mike. "We won. Riverview is acquiring Horizon. Bluestream outbid us, but the board chose our vision over their money." His reply came instantly. "Holy shit, we actually did it. Drinks tonight?" "Absolutely. Bring champagne." Later that evening, as Mike and I celebrated at my apartment overlooking the river, a notification appeared on my phone. It was a business news alert. Bluestream Tech CEO resigns following failed acquisition attempt. I showed the headline to Mike. "Looks like James Wilson's former company is as willing to dispense with underperforming executives as he was with employees." Mike raised his glass. "Poetic justice to emotional intelligence in algorithms and in business." I clinked my glass against his. "And to knowing your own worth, even when others don't see it." The next morning, the acquisition was front-page news in the business press. Riverview Capital acquires controlling interest in Horizon Analytics. Most reports focused on the financial aspects and market implications, but one industry publication dug deeper, noting that the deal hinged on proprietary prediction technology developed by Sarah Mitchell, who was controversially dismissed by former Horizon executive James Wilson shortly before the acquisition talks began. Walking into Riverview's offices that day felt different, charged with new possibility and validation. Jennifer had scheduled an all-hands meeting to discuss the acquisition and integration plans. As I entered the large conference room, I was surprised to find my name on the agenda as a featured speaker. "We want you to outline the technical vision," Jennifer explained when I questioned it. "This integration is built around your algorithm and approach. You should be the one to present it." The room filled quickly, with Riverview employees joined by video feeds from Horizon's offices. I recognized many faces from my former company, including Rachel, who gave me a subtle thumbs up from her position at the head of the Horizon contingent. Jennifer opened the meeting with a business overview of the acquisition, emphasizing the complementary strengths of the two companies and the strategic rationale for the combination. Then she introduced me. Many of you know Sarah Mitchell as the creator of Horizon's groundbreaking prediction algorithm. What you may not know is that her vision for data-driven emotional intelligence in analytics is the foundation of our combined future. Sarah will now outline how we'll integrate these approaches across the new organization. As I took the podium, I caught sight of a familiar face in the back of the room, Eleanor Richards, Horizon's board chair, who had evidently come to witness this moment personally. She nodded encouragingly. "Thank you, Jennifer," I began. "At the heart of effective predictive analytics is a fundamental understanding that humans are not purely rational actors. Our decisions, whether personal or professional, individual, or institutional, are influenced by emotional factors that traditional data models often ignore or minimize." I advanced to the first slide, showing a visualization of the algorithm's multidimensional approach. What makes our technology unique is not that it acknowledges emotional components. Many systems do that superficially. It's that we've developed a methodology to quantify and integrate these factors with conventional metrics, creating predictive models that reflect how people actually behave, not how we think they should behave. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the technical roadmap for combining Riverview's financial modeling expertise with Horizon's behavioral prediction capabilities. The approach wasn't just about maintaining the existing systems side by side, but truly synthesizing them into something new and more powerful. Ultimately, I concluded, this integration isn't about Riverview absorbing Horizon or vice versa. It's about creating a fundamentally new approach to analytics, one that respects both the quantitative rigor of traditional methods and the qualitative insights of behavioral observation. Not numbers versus emotions, but numbers and emotions, working together to create more accurate, more useful predictions. The presentation was met with enthusiastic applause, particularly from the Horizon employees who had witnessed the dismantling of these same principles under James Wilson's brief but destructive leadership. As the meeting transitioned to operational details, Jennifer pulled me aside. That was exactly the message we needed. You've given both organizations a vision they can rally behind. It's easier to be inspiring when you actually believe in what you're saying, I replied. This integration makes sense because it combines complementary strengths rather than forcing one approach to dominate. Speaking of integration, Jennifer said, I've received board approval for your appointment as Chief Innovation Officer. We'll announce it formally next week, but I wanted you to know it's official. The title represented far more than professional advancement. It was tangible recognition that innovation, true innovation, required both analytical rigor and emotional intelligence. That creating something valuable meant engaging with both the quantifiable metrics and the human experiences behind them. As the meeting concluded, Eleanor approached me. Congratulations, Sarah. This is a well-deserved outcome. Thank you for your support, I replied. I know the Bluestream offer was financially compelling. She smiled wryly. Money isn't everything in business, despite what some would have us believe. Vision, integrity, understanding what actually drives value. These things matter more in the long run. She paused, then added, I regret that we didn't recognize your contributions appropriately while you were at Horizon. It shouldn't have taken losing you to realize your value. Better late than never, I said, meaning it sincerely. And now we have the opportunity to build something better together. As everyone filed out of the conference room, Mike caught up with me. Chief Innovation Officer, he said, grinning. Pretty impressive for someone James Wilson called too emotional about her work. Turns out caring deeply about what you build is actually an asset, not a liability, I replied. Who knew? Everyone except James, Mike laughed. Wonder what he's doing now? I shrugged. Probably telling someone else they're being too emotional about something important. His loss, Mike said. Our gain. Later that afternoon, as I was settling into my new responsibilities, Rachel called with an unexpected update. Sarah, you won't believe this. James Wilson just applied for a position at Bluestream, apparently trying to go back after their CEO's resignation. They rejected him instantly. The market has a way of correcting itself eventually, I noted, unable to suppress a smile. It certainly does, Rachel agreed. By the way, the integration team needs your input on client communication strategy. How soon can you join us? I'll be right there, I promised, already gathering my notes. The work of building something new, something that honored both data and human experience, was just beginning. And this time, no one would be dismissing it as too emotional to matter. 6 months into the Riverview Horizon merger, the transformation was evident throughout both organizations. The integration teams had worked tirelessly to combine technologies, align corporate cultures, and create a unified vision. As Chief Innovation Officer, I had assembled a diverse department that blended technical expertise with behavioral insights, a living embodiment of the principle that emotional intelligence and data science were complementary, not contradictory. My new office on the 34th floor provided a panoramic view of Chicago's downtown and the lake beyond, a daily reminder of how dramatically circumstances could change. The glass walls allowed me to see the innovation lab I'd designed, a collaborative space where data scientists, psychologists, UX designers, and market analysts worked together to refine and expand our predictive capabilities. A light knock on my open door pulled me from my thoughts. Carlos, Riverview's chief strategist, entered with a tablet in hand. "The quarterly results are in," he announced, his typically serious expression softened by satisfaction. "They're exceptional. Sarah, client retention is up 23% compared to pre-merger levels, and new account acquisition has increased 17%. I gestured for him to take a seat. "How about the mid-market segment? That was where we saw the most damage during James's tenure." "That's the most impressive part," Carlos replied, sliding the tablet across my desk. "Mid-market retention has rebounded to 76%, almost back to its historical peak. Your team's adjustments to the algorithm are clearly working." I scanned the detailed metrics, noting with particular satisfaction that the emotional response indicators, the very measurements James Wilson had dismissed as irrelevant, showed the strongest correlation with improved client outcomes. "The board will be pleased," I noted, handing the tablet back. "These numbers validate our integration approach." "Jennifer already is," Carlos confirmed. "She's calling it a vindication of the merger thesis. The market seems to agree. Our stock is up 4% since word about the results started leaking." After Carlos left, I turned to my window, watching sunlight play across the glass towers of downtown Chicago. The merger hadn't been without challenges: complex technical integrations, occasional cultural clashes, and the inevitable uncertainty that accompanies organizational change. But the results spoke for themselves. The combined entity was stronger than either company had been independently. My phone buzzed with a message from Mike. "Quarterly numbers are spectacular. Team celebration at Riverfront Bar at 6? I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. First round on me." The team deserved celebration. They had embraced the merger's vision despite initial skepticism, working long hours to ensure the integration succeeded. Mike had been particularly instrumental, leading the technical architecture team with a combination of expertise and empathy that helped bridge the gap between Horizon's established systems and Riverview's more aggressive approach. Just as I was preparing to leave for a department meeting, my assistant, Tara, appeared at my door. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent." "Who is it?" I asked, already reviewing my schedule mentally. "A Mr. Wilson. James Wilson." The name landed like a stone in still water. James Wilson, the former supervisor who had called me too emotional, who had systematically undermined my work, who had fired me without understanding the consequences, was here, in the building. Did he say what he wants? I kept my voice neutral, though my pulse had quickened. "Just that it's important and confidential. He seems different from what you described, more subdued." I considered refusing the meeting. There was no professional reason to engage with James after everything that had transpired. But curiosity won out. "Send him in, but stay close. If I text you, come in with an urgent call for me." Tara nodded and disappeared. Moments later, James Wilson entered my office. 6 months had changed him visibly. The impeccable suits and carefully maintained appearance had given way to a slightly rumpled look. His confident stride was now more measured. But the most noticeable difference was in his eyes. The arrogant certainty had been replaced by something more complex, perhaps even a touch of humility. "Sarah," he began, hovering awkwardly near the door. "Thank you for seeing me. I know it's unexpected." "It is," I agreed, not offering him a seat immediately. "What can I do for you, James?" He glanced around my office, taking in the expansive space, the view, the visible trappings of executive authority. "You've done well," he observed, and to my surprise, there was no bitterness in his tone, just a simple acknowledgement of fact. "I have," I confirmed. "What brings you here today?" James exhaled slowly. "I wanted to speak with you personally. After everything that happened at Horizon, I believe I owe you an apology." Of all the scenarios I had imagined for this encounter, a straightforward apology wasn't among them. I studied his face for signs of insincerity, but found none. "Please, sit," I finally said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. As he settled in, I noticed the absence of his usual bravado. The James Wilson who had swaggered into Horizon 6 months ago would never have appeared this tentative. "I've had a lot of time to reflect," he continued once seated. "After Horizon, things didn't go well for me professionally. Bluestream rejected my application to return. Other firms were similarly uninterested once they learned the circumstances of my departure. I imagine that was difficult," I said neutrally, though part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction at the knowledge that actions had consequences, even for people accustomed to avoiding them. "It was," he acknowledged, "but it was also necessary. It forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my approach to leadership and to people." He paused, seeming to struggle with what came next. "Particularly my approach to women in technical roles and my dismissal of emotional intelligence as a critical component of effective analytics." I remained silent, allowing him the space to continue without interruption. This was clearly difficult for him, and some instinct told me it was important to let him work through it. "The algorithm you developed, the one I tried to strip of its emotional components, has transformed the industry. Every major analytics firm is now attempting to incorporate similar methodologies. What you built was visionary, and I was too blinded by my own biases to see it." He met my eyes directly. "I was wrong, Sarah. About the technology, about your capabilities, about what constitutes effective leadership. And I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, I would have given almost anything to hear James Wilson admit he was wrong. Now, having moved beyond Horizon to something better, I found the satisfaction muted. Not absent, but tempered by the understanding that his recognition changed nothing about my path forward. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally. "It couldn't have been easy to come here." "It wasn't," he admitted, "but it was necessary. For me, if not for you." "May I ask what you're doing now?" I inquired, genuinely curious about where life had taken him after his precipitous fall. A faint smile crossed his face. "Something unexpected. I'm teaching business ethics at Northwestern, with a focus on inclusive leadership and responsible innovation." The irony isn't lost on me. "That is unexpected," I agreed. "How did that come about?" "After being rejected by 6 companies in a row, I had what you might call a moment of reckoning. I enrolled in an executive coaching program, hoping to rebrand myself. The coach, who didn't mince words, suggested I needed to fundamentally reevaluate my understanding of effective leadership." James shook his head slightly, as if still surprised by the turn of events. "During that process, I was asked to teach a guest lecture on lessons learned from failure. The students responded well, and it led to a visiting professor position. Teaching the next generation of business leaders about the mistakes you made," I observed. "There's a certain poetry to that." "There is. Though I doubt the university would have offered the position if they knew the full extent of those mistakes." He hesitated, then added, "Which brings me to the second reason for my visit. I'm writing a case study about the Horizon situation for my ethics class. I wanted to ask your permission before including the details, and to see if you'd be willing to review it for accuracy." The request was unexpected, but not unreasonable. "I'd be open to reviewing it," I said carefully, though I'd want legal to look it over as well, given the confidentiality provisions in the merger agreement. Of course, he agreed quickly. I've already spoken with Eleanor Richards, who had similar stipulations. You've been in touch with Eleanor? This genuinely surprised me. Yes, she was. Direct about her assessment of my leadership, but ultimately supportive of the educational purpose. Rachel, too, though she was considerably less forgiving. I could imagine Rachel's response, professional but unflinching in her critique. She had witnessed firsthand the consequences of James's actions and had worked tirelessly to mitigate the damage. I'll have my assistant provide you with the appropriate contact information for our legal department, I told him. Send the draft through them, and I'll review it once they've cleared it. Thank you. James stood, preparing to leave, then paused. There's one more thing. I've been following the quarterly results for Riverview Horizon. The integration has been remarkably successful, more so than most industry analysts predicted. That's your doing, isn't it? The approach to combining the emotional metrics with Riverview's financial modeling? It's been a team effort, I replied automatically, though his recognition of my contribution was validating in ways I hadn't expected. A team you built and lead, he countered. I may have been wrong about many things, Sarah, but I've always understood results. What you've achieved here is exceptional, and I wanted you to know that I recognize that. With that, he extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I stood and shook it, not out of forgiveness, necessarily, but out of respect for the difficulty of the journey he described and the apparent sincerity of his recognition. Good luck with your teaching, James, I said as he turned to leave. I hope your students learn from your experiences. So do I, he replied simply. And then he was gone, leaving me with an unexpected sense of closure. I remained standing by my desk, processing the interaction. There was something undeniably powerful about receiving an apology I had never expected. A final confirmation that my assessment had been correct all along. Yet the professional validation I'd once craved from James now seemed almost incidental, compared to what I'd built in his absence. My phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. Board presentation at 3 p.m. Bring the innovation roadmap for Q3 if you're ready. The reminder pulled me back to the present. Whatever redemption arc James Wilson was navigating belonged to his story, not mine. My focus was on the future of Riverview Horizon and the expanded potential of the algorithm that had started this entire journey. The board presentation that afternoon was comprehensive, covering not just the impressive quarterly results, but our strategic vision for the next phases of integration. As I outlined the innovation roadmap, new applications for the predictive algorithm, expanded behavioral metrics for emerging markets, deeper integration with financial risk assessment, I was struck by how naturally the room received the concepts that James had once dismissed as irrelevant. What's particularly noteworthy, I explained as I showed a visualization of client engagement patterns, is that our highest value relationships consistently score above threshold on the emotional connection metrics. When clients feel understood and valued, when they believe we grasp not just their financial objectives but their underlying concerns, retention and expansion both increase dramatically. Jennifer nodded appreciatively. The numbers speak for themselves. The question now is how we scale this approach as we enter new markets. That's exactly what the next phase addresses, I continued, advancing to the implementation timeline. We've developed a modular version of the algorithm that maintains the core emotional intelligence components while allowing for cultural and regional customization. The board's response was enthusiastic, with several members specifically noting the competitive advantage created by our integrated approach. As the meeting concluded, Eleanor Richards, who had joined the Riverview board as part of the merger agreement, approached me. James Wilson came to see me last week, she said without preamble. He mentioned he was planning to speak with you as well. He did, I confirmed. Just this morning, actually. And? Her expression was curious but guarded. He apologized, seemed genuinely reflective about his mistakes. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. I had a similar impression. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed he was capable of that level of self-awareness. She paused, then added, though I did make it abundantly clear that no apology would result in him ever working at Horizon or Riverview in any capacity. I smiled at her directness. I appreciate that clarification, though I wasn't planning to suggest his rehiring. I didn't think you were, she replied. But boundaries matter. Speaking of which, Jennifer mentioned you've been putting in 70-hour weeks on the integration. That's not sustainable, Sarah, even for someone as dedicated as you. The observation was unexpected, but not inaccurate. The merger's success had indeed come at a personal cost. Long days, working weekends, constant mental engagement with complex problems. There's been a lot to do, I said, somewhat defensively. There always is, Eleanor countered. But now that the core integration is complete and the results are validating our approach, perhaps it's time to delegate more and focus on strategic direction rather than tactical implementation. Coming from anyone else, the suggestion might have felt like criticism, but Eleanor had earned my respect through her handling of the acquisition and her consistent support of our vision. You may be right, I acknowledged. Mike has been saying something similar. Mike is wise, she noted with a slight smile. Listen to him, and to me. The company needs you at your best, which means taking care of yourself as well as the business. After the board meeting, I found Mike waiting in my office, reviewing the same quarterly results Carlos had shared earlier. The board loved your presentation, he said, looking up as I entered. Jennifer's assistant said they're already discussing accelerating the international expansion based on your roadmap. That's encouraging, I replied, settling into my chair. Though apparently I need to work less, according to Eleanor. Mike laughed. I've been telling you that for months. You built a team for a reason, Sarah. Let them handle the execution, while you focus on the vision. Speaking of the team, are we still on for celebrations at Riverfront Bar tonight? Absolutely. Everyone's planning to be there. Even Diane is coming, and she never leaves the office before 8. Good. They deserve recognition for these results. I hesitated, then added, James Wilson came to see me today. Mike's expression shifted immediately to concern. What did he want? To apologize, apparently. He's teaching business ethics now, if you can believe it. Business ethics? Mike's eyebrows rose in disbelief. The man who tried to dismantle our entire approach because it was too emotional is teaching ethics? Life takes unexpected turns, I said with a slight shrug. He seemed genuinely changed by what happened. Let's hope so, for his students' sake. Mike studied my face. How do you feel about it? The apology, I mean. I considered the question carefully. Vindicated to some extent, but also, I don't know, disconnected from it? 6 months ago, his validation would have meant something to me. Now it's just an interesting footnote. Because you've moved beyond needing his approval, Mike observed. You know your worth now, regardless of whether he recognizes it. I think I always knew it, I corrected gently. But yes, I no longer need external validation of what I've built. The results speak for themselves. They certainly do, Mike agreed, standing. Now, about tonight, what are you wearing? Because if it's anything like what you wore to the office today, you're severely overdressed for Riverfront Bar. I glanced down at my tailored suit and smiled. I might have something more appropriate at home. I'll meet you there at 6. After Mike left, I turned back to my window, watching the afternoon light shift across the city skyline. The encounter with James had stirred unexpected reflections. Not about him. His journey of redemption or self-discovery was his own to navigate, but about my own evolution over these 6 months. I had transformed from a talented but undervalued analyst fighting for recognition to an executive helping shape an industry. The algorithm that had once been dismissed as too emotional was now the cornerstone of a thriving enterprise. And the qualities that James had perceived as weaknesses, my deep investment in my work, my understanding of emotional factors in decision-making, my insistence on recognition for contributions, had proven to be fundamental strengths. As I prepared to join my team for celebrations, I found myself thinking not about James's apology, but about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The path hadn't been easy or straight. It had required courage, strategic thinking, and the willingness to advocate for my own value when others failed to recognize it. But the view from here, both literally from my office window and figuratively from my position of influence, made every difficult step worthwhile. The algorithm continued to evolve, incorporating new insights and expanding into new applications. The team I'd built was thriving, bringing diverse perspectives to complex problems. And the integration of emotional intelligence with data science was transforming not just our company, but our entire industry's approach to predictive analytics. James Wilson had once told me I was too emotional about my work. What he had failed to understand, what so many leaders still failed to understand, was that emotional investment wasn't a liability but an asset. Caring deeply about what you create, understanding the human factors behind the data, recognizing the emotional components of seemingly rational decisions. These weren't distractions from excellence, but pathways to it. As I gathered my things to leave, my phone buzzed with another message from Jennifer. Executive Committee has greenlit the international expansion. We'll need your team to lead the algorithm adaptation for European markets. Details tomorrow, celebrate tonight. I smiled, typing back a quick acknowledgement. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now I was moving, forward on my own terms, my value recognized, my vision embraced. Not despite being too emotional about my work, but because of the insights that emotional intelligence had unlocked. And that, perhaps, was the most satisfying validation of all. 1 year to the day after the Riverview Horizon merger was finalized, I stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Chicago Marriott, addressing the annual conference on behavioral economics and business innovation. The room was filled with industry leaders, academics, and aspiring entrepreneurs, all gathered to discuss the future of predictive analytics. The integration of emotional intelligence into data science isn't just a technical innovation, I explained, displaying a complex visualization that tracked the relationship between client emotional response and business outcomes. It represents a fundamental shift in how we understand decision-making. Humans aren't purely rational actors, and our models shouldn't pretend they are. As I concluded my keynote and the applause rose around me, I caught sight of a familiar face in the third row, Jennifer Davis, who had championed my vision when others dismissed it. Her smile conveyed both pride and vindication. Beside her sat Mike, now Executive Vice President of Technical Integration, whose unwavering support had been instrumental throughout this journey. The team we'd built together had transformed not just Riverview Horizon, but the entire industry's approach to predictive analytics. After fielding questions from the audience, I made my way through the crowd of well-wishers and congratulatory colleagues. A tap on my shoulder made me turn to find Eleanor Richards, elegant as always in a tailored pantsuit. "Brilliant presentation, Sarah," she said warmly. "You've come a long way from those contentious board meetings at Horizon." "Thanks to your support," I acknowledged. "You took a chance on our approach when it would have been easier to go with Bluestream's offer." "Not a chance," she corrected. "An investment in proven innovation and human capital. The return has exceeded even my optimistic projections." She wasn't exaggerating. Riverview Horizon's stock had increased 47% since the merger, outperforming the market by more than double. Our client base had expanded into 3 new continents, and the algorithm, now known formally as the Mitchell-Thompson Predictive Framework, had been licensed to select partners under carefully controlled conditions. As Eleanor excused herself, to greet another attendee, Jennifer approached with 2 champagne flutes in hand. "Congratulations on the keynote," she said, passing me one of the glasses. "The response has been overwhelmingly positive." "Thank you for insisting I do it," I replied. "Public speaking still isn't my natural habitat." "You'd never know it," she assured me. "But that's not why I wanted to catch you. The board met this morning about the CEO succession plan. This was news to me. I thought that was scheduled for next quarter. It was accelerated. My contract ends in 18 months, and they wanted to ensure a smooth transition." Jennifer's expression was difficult to read. "They've unanimously approved you as CEO designate, Sarah. If you accept, we'll begin the formal transition process immediately." The offer momentarily left me speechless. Chief Innovation Officer to Chief Executive Officer in 18 months was a meteoric rise by any standard. "I'm honored," I managed finally, and somewhat surprised. "You shouldn't be," Jennifer said, firmly. "You've demonstrated not just technical brilliance but strategic vision and leadership capacity. The company's future direction is built around your approach to integrated analytics. Making you CEO is the logical next step." As I considered her words, my gaze drifted across the ballroom to where industry colleagues were animatedly discussing the presentation. Among them was a business reporter I recognized from the Wall Street Journal, who had once described my emotional metrics approach as revolutionizing how businesses understand client relationships. How far we had come from James Wilson's dismissive assessment of my work as too emotional to be valuable. His limited perspective, once so damaging to my career, now seemed like a relic from another era. The very qualities he had disparaged had become the foundation of unprecedented success. "I accept," I told Jennifer, my decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. "On one condition." "Name it." "We establish a formal mentorship program for women in technical leadership, with specific emphasis on emotional intelligence as a business asset, not a liability." Jennifer smiled. "Already in the succession proposal, the board anticipated you might want something along those lines." As we clinked glasses to seal the agreement, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending. There were still mountains to climb, innovations to create, barriers to break. But the closing of a significant chapter, the journey from being labeled too emotional to being named CEO, had been neither straight nor easy. It had required courage, strategic thinking, and the willingness to stand firm in my conviction that genuine understanding of human behavior, emotional and rational alike, was essential to predictive excellence. Later that evening, at a small celebration dinner with Mike, Jennifer, and key members of our innovation team, I raised a toast. "To emotional intelligence in business," I said, "and to never allowing others to define your value." Mike grinned. "And to supervisors who underestimate you at their peril." We laughed, but the truth beneath the humor resonated deeply. Every person at that table had experienced being dismissed or diminished in their career. Yet, here we were, leading an industry transformation precisely because we had refused to accept those limitations. As I looked around at these brilliant, dedicated colleagues who had become something like family, I felt a surge of gratitude for the journey, challenges included. James Wilson's misguided attempt to push me out had ultimately propelled me toward something far greater than I might otherwise have achieved. Being too emotional about my work hadn't been a weakness after all. It had been my greatest strength, the capacity to care deeply, to understand nuance, to see patterns that others missed because they were looking only at numbers, not at the human realities those numbers represented. And in the end, That understanding had changed everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.